The amphitheater stretched wide enough to hold 1,000 beings, but today only 12 seats mattered. They circled the center stage in the grand chamber of Nexus Station, each seat designed for a different species. Some floated. Some sprouted from the floor like crystal formations. Others were simple chairs, though made of materials that would cost a fortune on Earth. Ambassador Wei sat in the smallest one. It was still too large for her frame, making her feel like a child at an adult's table. She supposed that was intentional. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 37 years ago, and the older species never let them forget it. The hologram at the center of the room showed 17 star systems, all marked in red. Gone. Consumed. The swarm had eaten them in less than a year. "The projections are clear," said Coordinator, the representative. His body was made entirely of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light as he spoke. The translation device embedded in his ear converted his frequency patterns into words. At current expansion rates, the swarm will reach the home systems within 8 months. The core worlds fall within 3 years. 3 years. Let that sink in. 3 years until civilizations that had existed would cease to exist. "We must fortify the cluster," War Master announced. The looked like a 6-foot-tall eagle, if eagles had 4 arms and wore armor made of their own metallic feathers. "It is the natural. We station our combined fleets there, create a wall the swarm cannot penetrate." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The representative, floating in her water-filled sphere, waved a tentacle in approval. Others nodded or flashed colors or emitted sounds that meant yes. Studied the hologram. The cluster was indeed a dense grouping of star systems that formed a natural barrier. Any fleet trying to push into Council space would have to go through it. It made sense from a defensive standpoint. It also made sense from an attacker's standpoint to go around it. She raised her hand. The gesture felt absurdly primitive in a room where others communicated through light patterns and chemical signals, but it worked. Slowly, the other representatives turned to look at her. "Yes," Coordinator's crystal form flickered, perhaps with surprise. "The human delegation wishes to speak." Stood and walked to the center of the room. The hologram towered over her, making her feel even smaller. She expanded the map with a gesture, zooming out to show not just the cluster but the space around it. "War Master's plan is solid for a conventional enemy," she began, keeping her voice steady. "But the swarm hasn't behaved conventionally. Look at their pattern. They don't attack the strongest targets first. They consume the easy ones, gather resources, then hit the hard targets with overwhelming force." "We are aware of their tactics," interrupted. His beak clicked with impatience. "That is why we fortify now, before they can build sufficient force." "But what if they don't attack the cluster at all?" Highlighted a region on the map, a sparse area of space filled with dwarf stars and scattered asteroids. "This region is considered strategically worthless. Low resources, no valuable worlds, but it's also undefended. The swarm could bypass your defensive line entirely, establish forward bases here, and attack your core worlds from behind." Coordinator's crystal body flashed brighter. Translator interpreted it as amusement. "Ambassador, your species has been spacefaring for barely a century. They have studied stellar tactics for 12,000 years. The probability of the swarm choosing such an inefficient route is less than 3%. Unless efficiency isn't their only goal," pressed. "What if they prioritize survival? What if they're willing to take a longer route if it means avoiding a fight they might lose?" "The swarm does not think," said Diplomat. Her voice was gentle, almost pitying. "They are organic machines. They follow programming, not strategy." Pulled up data on her personal device, sending it to the main display. "We've observed them adapt 17 different times in the past year. They changed their ship designs after encountering plasma weapons. They modified their assault patterns after the deployed mathematical counteralgorithms. That's not programming. That's learning." Primitive learning, said. Stimulus and response, nothing more. You mistake animal cunning for intelligence. Maybe, admitted. But I'd rather overestimate an enemy than underestimate them. I propose we send small strike teams into their territory. Fast ships, minimal crew. They hit resource harvesting operations, supply lines, communication nodes. We don't meet them in a big battle. We make them bleed from 1,000 small cuts. The chamber fell silent. Then Coordinator began to pulse with light in a rapid pattern. Other species joined in with their own sounds and colors. It took a moment to realize they were laughing. Guerrilla warfare, said, and his translator carried a tone of disdain. You propose we adopt the tactics of insurgents and terrorists. I propose we adopt the tactics that work, replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. My species has been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've learned that the side with the biggest army doesn't always win. The side that adapts fastest does. Your species fights among yourselves with chemical explosives and metal projectiles, said. His light had returned to its normal steady pulse. We face an enemy that has consumed civilizations you cannot imagine. Your world wars were children squabbling in a sandbox compared to the conflicts we have witnessed. Then perhaps you need someone who still remembers how to squabble, shot back. Stood, his full height impressive even in the massive chamber. They have a military tradition spanning 4,000 years. We have forgotten more about warfare than humanity has ever learned. You are warriors, yes. We have seen your history. But you are warriors who fought with sticks and stones while we commanded fleets that could crack planets. And yet you're losing, said quietly. The chamber went cold. Several representatives made sounds of shock or disapproval. Feathers rippled in a pattern that cultural briefing had identified as extreme offense. We have suffered setbacks, Coordinator said, his voice hard. That does not mean we are losing. It means we face a difficult opponent. 17 star systems aren't setbacks, said. They're disasters, and more will follow if you keep fighting the way you've always fought. Enough! The word came from Speaker, the council's eldest member. She was a species so old that their evolutionary history predated several of the younger species' recorded histories. She rarely spoke during council sessions, preferring to observe and vote. When she did speak, others listened. The human makes a passionate argument, said. Her form was difficult to look at directly, something that existed in more dimensions than eyes could fully process. But passion is not wisdom. Ambassador, your species is young. You have courage, which is admirable, but courage without experience is recklessness. Speaker, we acknowledge your concern, interrupted gently. However, the Council has made its decision. We will implement War Master's defensive strategy. The combined fleet will fortify the cluster. You may record your objection in the official minutes if you wish. It wasn't a request, it was a dismissal. Looked around the chamber at the representatives of 12 species. Some wouldn't meet her eyes. Others watched her with expressions that ranged from pity to contempt. None showed agreement. I wish to record my objection, she said. So noted, Coordinator replied. This session is concluded. Fleet deployment will begin immediately. The representatives began to leave, their various forms of locomotion carrying them toward the chamber's many exits. Stood alone in the center of the room, the hologram still spinning above her. 17 red systems, soon to be more. Passed close to her on his way out. He paused, looking down at her with eyes that held something almost like sympathy. Your species survived by fighting each other, he said quietly. You developed tactics for tribal warfare, for conquering your neighbors. We developed tactics for defending civilizations across hundreds of worlds. We are not the same. No, agreed. We're not, that's what worries me. He left without responding. Soon was alone except for the station's AI attendants, who waited patiently to shut down the chamber's systems. She walked to the massive window that formed one wall of the amphitheater. Outside, space stretched in all directions. She could see ships coming and going from the station, could see the distant glow of nearby stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm was moving, consuming, growing. And the council was preparing to fight them the way they'd always fought their wars, with strength, with technology, with overwhelming force concentrated at a single point. Had read the history files. She knew about the great wars the council species had fought against each other and against external threats. They won through superiority, through having better ships, better weapons, better coordination. But the swarm didn't care about superiority. It cared about survival. It would adapt, evolve, find another way. Just like humans always had. She pulled out her communicator and sent a message to Earth. The reply would take weeks to arrive, but she sent it anyway. Council rejected our proposal. They're building a wall. I don't think the wall will hold. Request permission to begin contingency planning. She sent the message and stood watching the stars for a long time. Somewhere out there, 17 civilizations were gone, their people dead or absorbed, their cultures erased, their histories ended. Wondered how many more would fall before the council learned that sometimes the young species, the primitive ones, the ones who still fought with guerrilla tactics and asymmetric warfare, might have something valuable to teach. She hoped they'd learn before it was too late. The stars outside the window seemed to mock her hope. Some of them were probably already gone, their light still traveling across the void to reach her eyes, echoes of dead suns. Turned away from the window and left the chamber. She had reports to file, recommendations to document, contingencies to plan. The council might not listen to her now, but eventually they would need her. Eventually they would listen. She just hoped some of them would still be alive when that moment came. 3 months. That's how long the clustered defensive line held before everything went wrong. Admiral Reeves watched the tactical display from the bridge of the UESS Defiant, humanity's warship. Well, and smallest. The ship was barely a frigate by council standards, but she was fast and she was quiet, and right now those qualities mattered more than firepower. The display showed what remained of the defensive fleet. Dozens of massive warships, each one capable of reducing a planet to slag, all positioned in a perfect sphere around the cluster's key systems. It was an impressive sight. It was also meaningless. Because the swarm hadn't attacked the cluster. Status update, Reeves said to his tactical officer. The swarm bypassed the defensive line completely, sir. They moved through the Sector 7 void, exactly where Ambassador predicted. They've established forward bases on 47 asteroid installations and are beginning resource extraction. Council core worlds are reporting swarm scouts in their outer systems. Reeves closed his eyes briefly. Had been right. The Council had built their wall and the swarm had simply walked around it. Casualties. Estimates suggest 400 billion dead in the past 3 months, sir. The numbers are still coming in. Many colonies went silent before they could report. 400 billion. The number was so large it lost meaning. Reeves tried to picture it and failed. It was more than the entire population of Earth. It was more people than had lived and died in all of human history. Gone in 3 months. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Nexus Station. Priority 1. It's from Coordinator. Put it through. This crystal form appeared on the main screen. He looked dimmer than Reeves remembered from the briefings. Cracks ran through his structure that definitely hadn't been there before. Admiral Reeves said, "The Council requests humanity's immediate presence at an emergency session." "We weren't invited to the last session," Reeves replied, keeping his voice neutral. "That was an error. We acknowledge this error. We are acknowledging many errors." Slight pulsed weakly. "Please, Admiral, we need your help." Reeves had never heard a say please before. The species was famous for their logic, their precision, their absolute certainty in their calculations. Hearing one admit to error and beg for help was like watching a mountain apologize for being tall. I'll need to bring a tactical team, and I'll need full access to all swarm-related intelligence. You will have whatever you require. When can you arrive? 48 hours. The council will be waiting. Paused. Admiral, I must ask, did your ambassador truly predict this outcome? She did. And we dismissed her. It wasn't a question. Our projections showed only a 3% probability of the swarm choosing that route. We thought it too inefficient. Efficiency isn't everything, Reeves said. Sometimes survival matters more than optimization. We are learning this, Swarm flickered, the hard way. The transmission ended. Reeves turned to his crew. Helm, set course for Nexus Station, maximum speed. Tactical, start pulling together everything we have on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and insurgency operations. Communications, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the Council is ready to listen. And tell them what, sir? His communications officer asked. Reeves looked at the tactical display again, at the red markers spreading across the map like a disease. Tell them we have 3 years to save a galaxy that wouldn't listen to us 3 months ago. Tell them it's time to show these ancient civilizations how a young species wages war. The Defiant turned in space and accelerated toward Nexus Station. Behind them, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the dramas of the small beings who lived and died in their light. The amphitheater looked different this time. The seats were the same, but the beings who sat in them had changed. They looked smaller somehow, despite being the same physical size. They looked tired. They looked afraid. Reeves stood in the center of the chamber, the same spot where Ambassador had made her case 3 months earlier. The same spot where they'd laughed at her. No one was laughing now. The situation is critical, Coordinator explained, his crystal form projecting tactical data into the hologram above them. The swarm has established forward bases in 47 systems. They have surrounded our defensive positions at the cluster, effectively cutting off a third of our fleet. Refugee ships are flooding the inner systems. We estimate complete collapse of our defensive network within 6 months. Your predictions were wrong before, Reeves said bluntly. Why should we trust them now? Light dimmed further. We should not have dismissed Ambassador's warnings. Our models were based on the assumption that the swarm would behave optimally according to our definitions of optimal behavior. We failed to account for creativity, for lateral thinking, for the possibility that an enemy might choose a harder path to avoid a direct confrontation. You failed to account for survival instinct, Reeves corrected. The swarm doesn't care about efficiency. It cares about living, same as every other species in this galaxy. War Master stood. He looked older than in the recordings Reeves had watched. You were correct, Admiral. We were wrong. I have submitted my resignation as War Master. It has been declined. The Council wishes me to serve long enough to witness the consequences of my arrogance. I'm not here for apologies, Reeves said. I'm here because we're all going to die if we don't change how we fight this war. Then tell us how to fight, Speaker said. Her multi-dimensional form seemed more solid than before, as if she'd pulled herself fully into normal space through sheer force of will. We are listening now. Reeves gestured and his tactical display replaced the Council's. It showed not the familiar grand fleets and defensive lines, but something else entirely. Small groups, fast ships, independent operations. You've been fighting the swarm like it's a conventional enemy, Reeves explained. You position your fleets, you claim territory, you meet them in large engagements. That plays to their strengths. They have more ships, more resources, more production capacity. Every time you meet them in a fair fight, you lose. Then how do we win? Diplomat asked. If we cannot match their strength, if we cannot hold territory, what is left? We change the rules, Reeves said simply. We don't fight fair. We don't give them the battle they want. We hit them where they're weak and run before they can respond. We make them afraid to extend their supply lines. We make every resource they harvest cost more than it's worth. We turn their size against them. Guerrilla warfare said. What ambassador proposed? Not exactly, Reeves replied. She proposed guerrilla tactics. I'm proposing we rebuild your entire military doctrine from the ground up. Small, independent strike teams instead of grand fleets. Asymmetric operations instead of territorial defense. We make them fight our war, not theirs. Coordinator's crystal structure pulsed thoughtfully. You are proposing we abandon 12,000 years of military evolution. Everything we have learned about fleet operations, strategic positioning, combined arms coordination. I'm proposing you remember what it was like before you had fleets, Reeves said. Before you had combined arms. Back when you were young species fighting for survival against enemies bigger and stronger than you. Every species in this room had to do it once. You've just forgotten how. The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at each other, communicating in ways Reeves couldn't fully interpret. Finally, Speaker spoke. Your proposal has merit, but we have a practical problem. We do not know how to wage this type of war. Our military academies train officers in fleet command, not infiltration. Our warriors are heroes who face enemies directly, not shadows who strike from ambush. That's why you need us, Reeves said. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting guerrilla wars. We've been the insurgents and we've fought insurgents. We've learned how to win when we're outnumbered and have no chance in a fair fight. We're very good at not fighting fair. You are also young, pointed out. Your oldest military traditions span perhaps 3,000 years. How can such limited experience compare to our accumulated knowledge? Because we had to learn fast or die, Reeves replied. Your species developed advanced warfare over thousands of years. You had time to build fleets, establish doctrines, perfect your strategies. We didn't. We had to figure out how to win right now, every single time, or we'd cease to exist. That's a hell of a motivator. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are saying that humanity's constant warfare against itself is an advantage. I'm saying that when you've spent 10,000 years fighting over scraps of territory with sticks and stones, you get creative. You learn that the strongest army doesn't always win. You learn that positioning matters more than power. You learn that making your enemy fight on your terms is more important than having better weapons. This is not the way of honor, said, but his tone was thoughtful rather than dismissive. No, Reeves agreed. It's the way of survival, and right now, survival is all that matters. The council members communicated again, faster this time. Reeves waited. He'd made his case. Now it was up to them. Finally, Coordinator spoke. The council recognizes that our current approach is failing. We are willing to attempt a new strategy. Admiral Reeves, what exactly are you proposing? Reeves expanded his tactical display. I have 3 human warships in orbit around this station, small by your standards but fast and equipped with stealth technology. I propose we form mixed-species strike teams. My tactical officers provide strategy and command. Your species provide the specialized capabilities we lack, for systems analysis and hacking, for combat effectiveness, for advanced sensors, other species for their unique abilities. You wish to command council forces. There was an edge to his voice. I wish to lead a task force, Reeves corrected, with council approval and cooperation. This only works if we work together. How many teams? Asked. As many as we can field, 20 to start, 50 if we can manage it, each one targeting different parts of the swarm's infrastructure, resource harvesters, communication relays, construction facilities. We don't need to kill the swarm. We just need to starve it. And if your strategy fails? Asked. Reeves met her eyes, or what he thought were her eyes. Then we fail trying something new instead of failing doing what you already know doesn't work. But Speaker, we won't fail. Not if you trust us. Not if you let us show you how to fight. The council deliberated for 2 more hours. They argued about command structure, about resources, about risks, but in the end, they voted. 12 votes in favor, 0 against. The council approves your proposal, Admiral Reeves announced. You will have operational command of a joint task force. All council species will contribute resources and personnel. You will coordinate with existing fleet elements but will have independent authority to conduct operations as you see fit. Stood again. Admiral, I wish to volunteer for your task force. My pride prevented me from seeing clearly before. Perhaps serving under a human commander will teach me the humility I require. I'll be glad to have you, War Master, Reeves said. Your combat experience will be invaluable. There is one condition, Coordinator said. This task force must show results quickly. We do not have years to experiment. We have months at most. Understood, Reeves replied. Give me 3 weeks to train the teams and run simulations. Then we'll show you what asymmetric warfare can do. The session ended. As the council members departed, several approached Reeves personally. They thanked him. They apologized. They promised cooperation. But it was who stayed the longest. The War Master stood beside Reeves, both of them looking at the holographic display of the swarm's positions. We were fools, said quietly. We dismissed your ambassador because she was young, because her species was young. We thought age meant wisdom. Sometimes it does, Reeves said. Sometimes it just means you've been doing the same thing for a long time. They have a saying, continued. The greatest warriors know when to bow. I am bowing now, Admiral. Teach us how to fight. Reeves clasped the alien's shoulder, the gesture awkward but sincere. We'll learn together, War Master. That's how this works. They stood in silence for a moment longer, 2 warriors from different species, looking at a map of a war neither of them could afford to lose. Then Reeves turned and left the chamber. He had teams to organize, personnel to recruit, strategies to develop. The council had given him 3 weeks. He'd need every second. The first strike team launched 18 days later. Team Alpha consisted of 2 humans, 3, 2, and 1 sensor specialist. They piloted a modified assault ship equipped with human stealth technology and electronic warfare systems. Their target was a swarm resource harvesting operation in the Outer Rim, a facility processing raw materials from a dead world's asteroid belt. Intelligence suggested it supplied 3 forward bases with construction materials. Admiral Reeves watched from the Defiance Command Center as Team Alpha approached their target. The operation commander was Lieutenant Sarah, one of humanity's best special operations officers. Her voice came through clear and steady. Alpha to command, we're in position. No indication we've been detected. Beginning approach. The tactical display showed the team's ship moving slowly toward the harvesting facility. The swarm had positioned defense drones around the operation, but they followed predictable patrol patterns. The team members had analyzed their movements and found the gaps. 30 seconds to optimal position, reported. All systems green. Weapons free when ready, Alpha, Reeves responded. The team moved into position. From this angle, they could hit the facility's control center and primary power distribution with a single volley. It would take the swarm hours to restore operations, maybe days. Firing said. The assault ship's weapons weren't subtle. Plasma bolts crossed the void and punched into the facility. Explosions bloomed in silence, destroying critical systems. The harvesting arms went limp. Processing equipment went dark. The facility was dead in 30 seconds. Multiple contacts. His voice stayed calm despite the urgency. Swarm defenders responding. Count is 20, no, 30 ships inbound. We're moving to extraction. This was the critical moment. The swarm would try to trap them to prevent their escape. A conventional fleet would have reinforcements nearby to extract the team. Reeves had no reinforcements. Alpha, execute evasion pattern Delta, Reeves ordered. The modified ship accelerated hard, but not toward friendly space. Instead, it dove toward the planet itself, using the gravity well and atmospheric interference to mask its signature. The swarm ships followed, but their heavier vessels couldn't match the team's maneuverability. "They're losing us," reported. "Atmosphere is scrambling their sensors. Team members are feeding false signatures. They think we're heading to the southern hemisphere." "Good, circle around and head north once you clear their sensor range. Rendezvous point Charlie." "Roger that, Alpha out." The team escaped. The facility was destroyed. The swarm's forward bases would run short of materials in a matter of weeks. One operation, one small victory. But it was a start. Over the next 3 months, Reeves launched 47 operations. Teams hit communication relays, disrupted supply convoys, destroyed processing facilities, and planted corrupted code in swarm networks. Not every operation succeeded. Team Delta was lost when they encountered an unexpected swarm rapid response unit. Team Gamma barely escaped after their target turned out to be more heavily defended than intelligence suggested. But more operations succeeded than failed, and each success hurt the swarm in ways that grand fleet battles never could. The swarm began to change its behavior. It pulled forces back to defend key installations. It rerouted supply lines. It devoted resources to hunting the strike teams instead of expanding into new territory. For the first time since the war began, the swarm was reacting instead of acting. Coordinator called Reeves to Nexus Station for a status update. This crystal form looked brighter than before, healthier. The cracks in his structure had begun to heal. "Your strategy is working," admitted. "The swarm's expansion has slowed by 43%. Their production output has dropped by 31%. They are adapting their tactics to counter ours, which means they are spending resources on defense instead of offense." "It's a start," Reeves said, "but we're nowhere near done. The swarm is huge. We've hurt them, but we haven't stopped them." "No, but we have bought time. That is something we did not have 3 months ago." Paused. "I have analyzed humanity's military history, Admiral. Your species has fought over 10,000 recorded wars against each other. Do you know what I found most interesting?" "What's that?" "Humanity loses often. Your history is filled with failed campaigns, lost battles, defeated armies. And yet you continue. You adapt. You learn. You try again. Most species in the galaxy have fought far fewer wars because they are either successful or they cease to exist. Humanity has lost countless times and still survived." "We're stubborn," Reeves said with a slight smile. "No, you are resilient, and you have taught us to be resilient as well." Light pulsed warmly. "The Council wishes to expand the task force. We want to field 200 strike teams within 6 months. That's ambitious." "We have learned ambition from you. We have learned that age does not guarantee wisdom. That experience can become dogma. That sometimes the voice in the room has the most important thing to say." "We got lucky," Reeves said. "Ambassador made the right call. I'm just following through." "Luck favors the prepared," replied. "And you prepared for war in ways we never imagined. Tell me, Admiral, do you think we can win?" Reeves looked at the tactical display, at the map of the galaxy with its red markers and blue indicators. The swarm still controlled vast territories, still threatened entire civilizations, still consumed worlds. But the red markers weren't spreading anymore. Some were even turning blue as strike teams liberated captured systems. "Yes," Reeves said, "we can win. It won't be quick and it won't be easy. But if we keep adapting, keep learning, keep hitting them where they're weak, we'll win." "Then we will keep fighting," said, "your way." The war continued for 2 more years. The strike teams grew from 47 to 312. Every council species contributed. Every species learned. They learned that honor could be found in ambush as well as direct combat. They learned that sometimes the optimal solution wasn't the one their mathematics predicted. They learned that violence, when wielded carefully, could save more lives than diplomacy. And humanity learned to work with others, to combine their hard-won tactical knowledge with technologies and capabilities they could never have developed alone. The turning point came in the Battle of Prime, the Swarm's primary production facility. It wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. No grand fleet engagement. No heroic last stand. Instead, 50 strike teams hit the facility simultaneously from 50 different angles. They destroyed resource pipelines. They planted corrupted code that spread through the Swarm's network. They eliminated key nodes and cut communication between different Swarm elements. In 6 hours, they crippled a facility that had taken the Swarm 5 years to build. Without Prime, the Swarm couldn't sustain its forces. It began to collapse, falling back to defend what remained of its territory. The Council's conventional fleets, finally able to engage an enemy that wasn't constantly expanding, pushed forward. 1 year later, the war ended, not with a surrender or a treaty. The Swarm didn't think that way. It simply retreated into deep space and went dormant, conserving what little it had left. The galaxy was saved. The celebration at Nexus Station lasted 3 days. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to honor the warriors who had turned the tide. Medals were awarded. Speeches were given. Songs were sung in a dozen languages. On the 4th day, the council convened. All 12 seats were filled, but now a 13th seat had been added. It was sized for a human, placed at a position of honor between the and the. Ambassador sat in it. Beside her, Admiral Reeves stood at attention. Speaker addressed the assembly. We gather to acknowledge a truth that nearly cost us everything. We believed that age meant wisdom, that our long histories gave us certainty. We were wrong. Coordinator's crystal form pulsed with steady light. Humanity joined the Galactic Council 39 years ago. By our standards, they are infants. By any objective measure, their technology is primitive, their experience limited, their civilizations young. And yet they saved us. Not because they were stronger, War Master added, but because they thought differently, because they had learned lessons we had forgotten, because they refused to fight the way we insisted was correct. Continued. The Council has voted unanimously to restructure our decision-making process. Never again will any voice be dismissed simply because it comes from a young species. Never again will we assume that age equals superiority. We nearly died because we would not listen. We will not make that mistake again. The chamber filled with sounds of approval from dozens of species. Stood, her small frame dwarfed by the massive space, and yet somehow not small at all. Thank you, she said simply, but I need to say something. In 50 years, maybe less, another species will join this council. They'll be younger than us. They'll have different ideas, different perspectives, and some of those ideas will seem wrong to us. She paused, looking around the chamber. When that happens, remember this moment. Remember that we almost lost because you wouldn't listen to us. And remember that someday we'll be the old ones. We'll be the ones with centuries of experience and established doctrine. We'll be the ones who think we know better. And we must remember to listen anyway, Reeves added. Every species has something to offer. They have their mathematics. They have their martial traditions. They have their diplomacy. And humans, well, we have our stubbornness. Our refusal to accept that a fight is unwinnable, our willingness to fight dirty if that's what it takes to survive. Together, we are stronger than apart, concluded. Not because we're similar, because we're different. Every species brings something unique to the table. The trick is being willing to listen to all of them. The Council voted on a new charter that day. It required that all proposals be seriously considered regardless of source. It manned.